We on, Jeff? Test 1 2. Test 1. Okay. And we are we on? Okay. So just hmm yeah, yeah, yeah. Right. She have I think they call it mastectomy if that works, and if they feel like that would. No, you're fine. Yeah, 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 yeah. Sure, sure. Yeah. Well, make sure she realizes that there are several ladies, and I'm sure she knows some as well. But I know my mom went through it, and I know Vicky went through it. So there are other folks here if she likes to, would like to visit or talk or whatever. Hmm. Yeah, yeah. she could, couldn't be that age. She she was old whenever that happened to her, and I'm 60, so it couldn't have been that same age. That's what I gathered from that conversation. Has it been a long day, Brenda? So you need to work some overtime. uh, speak, Speaking of back, Anne had her procedure, surgery, I guess. I don't know what you exactly would call it today, but in the doctor's office. And they said it went well, but she was in quite a bit of pain, so they were trying to get that managed before she went home. So anyway, so yeah, I think she's hope that gets her covered for a little while anyway, for sure. Yeah, yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's really good. I don't know how many of you heard Christy's dad had a stroke Sunday afternoon, and but they took him to the emergency room right away, and he's back home. Y'all, was Christy was talking to y'all today. He's back home, and yeah, 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 yeah. So. and I think with a stroke, it's the quicker you can get to the hospital, the better off you are.
The first 78 hours.
Yeah. Yeah. So that part of it was good.
And then the 78 hours after is crucial too for
Hmm.
another one. So.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Any other prayer requests?
Just our school system and this COVID-19, trying to work around it.
Yeah, it's been crazy.
Well, Prairie has 68 students on virtual learning and 38 of them are family. And they had a big write in the paper yesterday, and most all the schools are having issues with it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Mr. Ballard said he's being ready to.
Yeah. They.
Curtis High's doing a hotline or something.
Yeah. Haley's there, and yeah. 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 I know Pearland's been pushing to lead the way on, pushing forward through all of it. So that part of it's been good. Jen showed me a picture where they were doing teacher dress up day, where they were dressing, kids were dressing up. And there was a little kid there that looked just like Roger. I was just dress up like your favorite teacher. I didn't know Roger was a teacher, but he made such an impression that they dressed up just like Roger. They dressed up like you. Well, anytime you do anytime you do rock climbing with the kids in the gym, you make an impression and get in trouble with them, from the teachers. If the teachers are getting on to you as much as they are the kids. uh, Jennifer's sister, how's she doing? Good, good. Yeah, right. Good deal. All right. Dad, did you lead us in prayer? Him. All right. Deuteronomy 28, going through blessings and the curses. Mosaic covenant, and we'll talk about this more when we get into the commandments and obedience. Um, there was a very tangible way that God put in place for them to know if they're in covenant relationship. Um, and it's an extension of the Abrahamic covenant. Abrahamic covenant being land, seed, and about land, seed, and blessing. So in the Mosaic covenant, you have implications of
keeping the commands or not, and the keeping of the commands or not is going to be seen in how that reflects then on land, seed, and blessing. So everything in terms of their thought process was covenantal in its relationship. What has God promised, and what has God said that He would do, and how should I respond in relation to that promise? It's not that aspect of it is not much, very much unlike our covenantal relationship with Him. The Mosaic covenant with Moses, one of the things that we got to remember with the people of Israel is they never obeyed, by and large, and that never obeying was not the problem. So a lot of times the thing you have to be careful about whenever you study this and you start thinking about law and you start thinking about even the Ten Commandments. So even if you think about the law, instead of all the things we're talking about right now, even if you just think about it as it relates to the Ten Commandments, because Ten Commandments are basically a overview of the Mosaic covenant. So you take the Ten Commandments and then you flesh that out. What does that look like? And you see all of that in Deuteronomy and all of the laws that are being given. But you could trace that down to its root, and its root would be 10 Commandments. 4 commandments between man and his relationship with God. 6 commandments in between man's relationship with one another. New Testament comes in and Christ says, what is the law? And the answer is, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. First 4. And the second is likened unto it, love your neighbor as yourself, the other 6. So you kind of, if you wanted to go to the main root, that would be the main root. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. If you do, what's going to happen? You're going to love your neighbor as you love yourself. And if you do that, what's going to happen? You're going to start seeing the 10 Commandments that are going to be flowing out from you. And if you do that, what's that going to look like? Go to all the other commandments and you're going to see all that flesh out. If my main living area is a rooftop, which theirs was, I'm going to put a rail around it because I care about you being on top of my roof and I don't want you to fall off. Does it make sense? I'm not going to slay you, murder you, if I love you, and I'm not going to, I'm not going to not love you if I love God with all my heart, mind, soul, and strength. Why? Because God, His very character and nature is that of love. So, when the commandments in and of themselves are not bad or wrong, okay? And that's one of the things we've got to really work through, and so I'm excited about even the series that's really an extension of heaven, in terms of how do we keep commandments and how does that look like, So I'm really excited about that. But in this you got to understand that the problem was not that they didn't keep the commandments. The problem was, in essence, that in the commandments they thought that they could find and develop life in the essence of being righteous before God. If I keep these commandments, I'm going to be righteous before God. Okay? That's a lack of dependency upon the grace of God, and it's an onus as if the flesh of man could actually keep the commandments. Well, how does man? Why would man? You and I are in this. Why would we think we could keep the commandments? And I would say probably the answer to that is because we can keep a bunch of them. The ones we like, I mean, anybody here murdered anyone? I hope not. As anybody, and you can go through all of them, and you can say, well, and Paul was kind of like that because Paul in the New Testament, he says if you want to look at a religious person, I came to the forefront. It wasn't a negative. It was I was doing all of those things, right? But what slew Paul? Do you remember? What commandment of the 10? Which one slew Paul so I couldn't get past it? You remember what it was? Trivia question. I should get some candy like Roger and hand it out or something, You remember what it was? Anybody remember what it was? is coveting. Coveting. Yeah. Why do you think coveting would get him, or get anybody for that matter? Yeah, you got somebody else has something that you want. What makes that wrong? Yeah, you can start to command it. Yeah. Yeah, in essence, what makes that at its root, what makes wanting what someone else has, what makes that wrong at its very root? Okay, so if you're not thankful for what you have, what are you saying about who gives you what you have? So in essence, your problem is with God, because you're a believer in which God gives everything of what he has, and someone has something that you don't have, so who's not giving it to you? Yeah. And oh, by the way, in the case even of Paul, that can even be good things. I mean, that can even be good things. What do you mean? Yeah, so is that pre or post Christian when he said that? It'd be post. I mean, he was Christian when he said that. When he was referring to his what slew him on coveting and what ended up slaying him, what's he speaking of, pre or post Christian? Pre. I'm seeking to keep the law, and oh, by the way, nobody could hold up to my standards, but even I failed. Why did I fail? Coveting killed me. Coveting killed me. Well, what do you think he was coveting if he's moving up the ladder of religious leadership? Well, yeah, you can move. That's again, yeah. Where's Jennifer? um, yeah. Have you ever noticed that you in any given field that you are in are not number one? No, and you want to be number one, but guess what? There is no number one in any given field, everywhere, always, and forever. Doesn't matter what occupation that you're in. So even if you're in a good, great, godly occupation, let's say pastorate, right? Can you want to be name off whoever your favorite preacher is, pastor is, nationally recognized, whoever? But that coveting, even though the office may be good, coveting would be sin. Why would coveting be sin to want to be someone else? What did we say already? That's not what God's giving you. In fact, explicitly in the New Testament, we find that in the church, we are incomplete. Every person is incomplete. Why is that? You all have a special part. Yeah, all have a special part, and we all have needs. Absolutely, absolutely. Each has been given a certain talent. So the issue was not them not being able to keep the law. The issue is, and that's what Paul brings up in Galatians, is if you're going to seek to attain righteousness through keeping the law, here's what you have to understand. You've got to keep all of it. In other words, 99.9% is not enough. You have to keep all of it. If you're seeking through that to be, what we would say is, be made right? Righteousness. So if you're going to seek to do it through that avenue, you have to do it. You have to do all of it. Now, the problem is you had a group in the New Testament, we talked about this last week, you had a group in the New Testament who were Paul-like. They're keeping a bunch of it. And you look around and you say, I'm not as righteous as what they are. And the idea is they're the standard. And so if I can seek to meet that standard, I'm all right. Well, Jesus comes in, and what does he say about their standard? You've heard it said, Old Testament, who said that? God. But I say, I'm claiming to be God in that statement, thou shalt not murder. I say, if anyone is angry with his brother, he's liable before the courts, he's liable to go for fire or hell. So what's he doing in relation to that? He's breaking down the idea that you think you can keep the law and you can't. Your righteousness has to be better than, think of it this way, Paul, Pharisee of Pharisees, Benjaminite. All the credentials. You would have to be better than him. Well, that's meant to slay you, right? So then he comes in for a summation of that. Let's give a summary of that. Broad is the way that leads to destruction. Now, we've defined that, and it's incredibly unfortunate because we fell into exactly what he's speaking against. We preach that as saying, so you've got to live a moral life. Broad is the way that leads to destruction. All of this sin and this evil. You know what he's actually saying there? The exact opposite of that. Your righteousness would have to supersede the greatest and best of all people. And broad is the way of people that live that way. That's what we were talking about last week. The big crux of the matter is, am I going to work to make my wage of righteousness? Right? And that's a broad way. And you believe, and we believe, even the church today, for the most part, believes that is the way that leads to life. It's a opening that leads to life. So if I just do enough good things and live righteous enough, green pastures for me. But Jesus' assessment of that is, that's the way that actually leads to destruction. But then he says, but narrow is the way, and when he's speaking about narrow is the way, he's speaking of himself, Jesus, to be hemmed in. When a person is hemmed in, right, let's say you get pushed into a corner, what does that look and feel like? You ain't got nowhere to go. It does not look like a place where I want to go. I don't want to get hemmed in, right? Leave my options open. I always say leave a back door that you can sneak out of, right? No. Narrow, hemmed in, the way that I don't think I want to go. Same as Jesus. Jesus is the path that leads to, we think, hemmed in destruction. Why would we think that? It's going to get me killed. It got him killed. and we look around today, we're not far from thinking that it can get us killed. Right? It looks like it's going to get me killed, and if it gets me killed, the thought is, I'm dead. No life. But he says, no. what looks like the hemmed-in way that is going to lead to total annihilation and destruction is actually the way that leads to life. Exactly the opposite of what we think. So now Jesus comes in the New Testament and he starts speaking in terms of, I am the way, I am the truth, that which you can rely on, I am the broad ending, if you will, life. But my way is a narrow, what looks like a very hemmed-in way. So their problem wasn't that they didn't keep the commands. Their problem was they thought that in their commands they could find life. I was saying to several people several times, Tom Brady, calm down, Haley, it's going to be okay. Tom Brady, she's a Tom Brady fan. Tom Brady wins Super Bowl. The greatest achievement that a quarterback can make. I'll find life there. Bob Lilly actually did the exact same thing the day after the Super Bowl. I think he was at actually like an airport, and there was this whole conversation. It actually led to his conversion. I thought winning the Super Bowl, I would find life. And I woke up the next morning and said, to his own admission, is this all that there is? Is this all that there is? And what did he find? It sold me on something that wasn't actually there. And I put all of my eggs in that basket, and now when it was supposed to pay me back, what did it do? It charged me instead of paying me compound interest. Right? See, if you buy into the law is going to be what's going to bring you life, and the keeping of the law is what's going to bring you life, what are you going to find? You're not going to find happiness at the end of that road. Right? So their problem is that their belief that in keeping the law they were going to be maintained righteousness. They're going to find righteousness. And they never did. I mean, they come out of Egypt. God shows himself in miraculous ways, shows the distinction between him and the gods of Egypt, and what's the first thing that they do? Complain and grumble and all this stuff, and Sinai, and on and on and on and on and on and on. But the problem is they say, yeah, all that we'll do it. We'll do it. So when you come here in Deuteronomy, you've got about 16 verses of blessing, and you've got about 64 of cursing. Right? So if you don't do it, you're gonna. If you don't, you're gonna. If you don't, you're gonna. If you don't, you're gonna. Well, at some point, you want to say, that risk isn't going to be there. Now we're talking about a nation as a whole. Okay, nation as a whole, and that's going to play into now. How do we understand some individuals in relation to this particular nation? What's going on in their life? But God said that you are cursed, and it's going to help, hopefully for you guys, help put some pieces together on why Old Testament believers were thinking the way that they were thinking. Okay? Because I'm going to look through what the covenant says in relation to a blessing and curse, and that's how I can understand where am I at in my relationship with God. That's why I'm going to sift through that, right? So, 28. Let's go 13. We're just about to go to 12, and we're kind of in transition here between the blessing and the cursing. The Lord will open up for you his good storehouse, the heavens, to give rain to your land at seasons and bless you with all the work of your hand. You shall lend to many nations, but you shall not borrow. The Lord will make you the head and not the tail. And you only will be above. You will not be underneath. If you listen to the commandments of the Lord your God, which I charge you today to do them carefully, and do not turn away from them, the words which I command you to the right or to the left, or go after other gods to serve them. But it shall come about, if you do not obey the Lord your God, to observe to do all his commandments and his statutes which I charge you today, then these curses will come upon you and overtake you. Cursed shall you be in the city, and cursed shall you be in the country. Cursed shall be your basket, and cursed shall be your kneading bowl. Cursed shall be the offspring of your body, and the produce of your ground, the increase of your herd, and the young of your flock. Cursed shall you be when you come in, cursed shall you be when you go out. Now remember, we talked about this with blessing. So when he goes one extreme and the other, what's he talking about? All of it. Cursed when you come in, cursed when you go out. There's no place where you won't be cursed in relation to that, right? The Lord will send upon you curses, confusion, and rebuke in all that you undertake to do until you are destroyed and until you perish quickly on account of the evil of your deeds because you have forsaken me. The Lord will make the pestilence cling to you until he has consumed you from the land where you are entering to possess. The Lord will smite you with consumption and with fever and with inflammation. You will lose the taste, and you will lose. Oh no, that's Corona. I'm sorry. My bad. With fiery heat, and with the sword, and with the blight, with the mildew, and they will pursue you until you perish. The heaven which is over your head will be bronze, and the earth under you iron, and the Lord will make the rain of your land powder and dust. From heaven it shall come down on you until you are destroyed. So, no rain and famine. Are you blessed or cursed? Cursed. So when Naomi, her husband, leaves the land of Israel, what's happening in Israel? Famine. Israel's cursed. So he goes to get out of the land. But when he goes and gets out of the land, what happens whenever he goes to the foreign land? What happens to him? He dies, and then what happens? The boys die. So what does Naomi say? In essence, when she says, call me, bitter. Why? I'm cursed. I'm cursed. Well, there's the applicable one. Okay, so when you're experiencing the discipline of God, are you seeking to run away from the discipline of God? Or are you accepting the discipline that God has given you? You are right, God. What I've done is wrong. Now you're talking about national implications. But when you're fleeing from that, then the question is, are you seeking to try and survive, or are you seeking to flee from the curse of God? Right. Yeah. So now you're going into the land where God has not pronounced blessing, and you're seeking to be blessed, and every time your offspring die, and and this is all compounding. Yep. The Lord will cause you to be defeated before your enemies. You will go out one way against them, but you will flee 7 ways before them, and you will be an example of terror to all the kingdoms of the earth. Your carcasses will be food to all the birds of the sky, the beasts of the earth. There will be no one to frighten them away. So, Eli's 2 sons are good or wicked. They're wicked, and Philistines come, and they go to fight, and what happens? Yeah, they're being killed. So what do? They go and get the Ark of the Covenant, which is the representation of the presence of God. Philistines start saying, what is this? We're dead. The Israelites start celebrating. They go and attack Philistines, and what happens? Yep. The Lord will smite. The 27 is important. The Lord will smite you with boils of Egypt, and with tumors, and with the scab, and with the itch from which you cannot be healed. What character do we have in the Old Testament that had that? Do what? Yeah, I don't know, did Lot have that? I don't know. Well, I'll have to look into that because my thought didn't go there, but I did think about Job. Okay, I wasn't. Yeah, I wasn't saying you weren't wrong. I just didn't. Yeah. It sounds like job only with a different. Yeah. 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 You had the O. Yeah, you had the middle right. Yeah. Yeah. Job has that happen. So Job is being presented as what? Cursed by God. What of all of his friends when they approach him? What are they saying? And well, his wife said, "Curse God and die." But what did his friends say? Whatever you did wrong, repent of it. Why are they saying that? He all of the symptoms that he has is that he's cursed. And what's Job coming back and saying? No. In essence, there's something different. But you should I don't want to say necessarily have sympathy, but everybody's hard on his friends. The lesson there is be careful because everything that you can see seems as though it is one thing. That's why justice is always coming up in the Bible, because ultimately, who is the only one who can be truly just? Yeah, why would we say God? What's this doesn't sound like a hard question, but what's the difference between God and us as it relates to justice? He sees everything, including everything on the inside, to judge rightly. That's why when justice does not happen, right, as it should, the answer to that is for the Christian is leave room for the vengeance of God, the justice of God. Well, is that just like saying, well, let God get them back? No, what's going on there is you've been wronged, and there's nothing you can do to make it right. It's almost as if there's a wrong that's been done. I mean, everybody has been wronged in some way. Say somebody else who didn't deserve that promotion kissed tail to the point where they did get that promotion. Well, that was an injustice. They didn't get it based upon their work. They got it because they're a weasel, right? And so, they got the job, you didn't, and that was unjust. Well, you're in a powerless position and it's not your responsibility at that point to make that wrong right. How can you let that go without letting it go? Because if you just let it go and say, oh, never mind, it's no big deal, you aren't holding to justice. The martyrs who are in heaven right now in the temporary time are praying to God, when will you make injustice right that's going on earth? When are you going to make that right? And God doesn't come back and say, oh, justice isn't that big of a deal. No, I will make that right. I will make that right. That's where that passage comes in. So why is the promise that you have to rely on, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, in order to be able to move forward on true injustices that have not been made right? Because you are holding that. God sees and He knows, and He is going to make all things right. And he knows even better than you or I exactly what the circumstances are. Because let's be honest, on a lot of these things, they may be pure evil, and we know that they are evil, and they are absolutely wrong. You know, and we would love to make that right, but it's not within our power to do that. Those things God's going to handle and take care of. Okay? He is going to take care of that. That injustice is not going to be wiped out as if it didn't happen. That's why that's such a big deal, because either you're going to try and live by the law to make all things right, and you think, if I do enough, it's going to wipe away the wrong that I did, and God is in here, He's saying, I'm a just God who's going to make all accountables right, and you're going to have them right based upon one of two ways. You're either going to pay the penalty for it, spend eternity in hell, or it's going to be the righteousness of God that's going to be applied to you. One of those two things. And when that literal injustice has been done, evil has been done, there's then has to be the faith that God sees, and God's going to handle that. And if you really think about the justice of God, woe to that man or woman. Because the reality is, He will pay them back better than you or I ever could, because He sees as it is. Now, that's one extreme. But the other extreme is sometimes we get accusatory towards people. But have you ever had it where all of a sudden some other little bit of information came out and you're like, oh, if I had known that, I probably wouldn't have been so hard on you. Well, guess what? That's why you have to understand God sees all of it. Now, there's some of it a blind man can see, but there's also a lot of it that you may not necessarily know all of the circumstances. And so what are you doing in light of not necessarily knowing all of the circumstances? You're believing in a God who does know all of the circumstances and who will make all of those things right. When Job's friends come in there, they continually are pounding him with, you have done wrong, and God is paying you back. Right? See, they're in that second category that's God's a just God and is going to make all things right. And if this poor brother's in this much misery, it'd be better for me to just be there with him through this and be silent than it would be maybe sometimes to try and give him advice on what he ought to do because of his sin. Now, that also speaks of something. You see this, what was Hannah's problem connected to Eli as well? What was her heart broken over? Remember what Hannah's heart was broken over? She wasn't having a child, which meant that she was barren and cursed. And cursed. Now, was Israel living rightly before the eyes of God at that time, yes or no? The answer is no, and how do we know that? There's two reasons. One, Eli and his sons, Eli wasn't handling his sons well because God said that, and Eli's sons were not handling their business appropriately to the priesthood as they should, because the Bible tells us that, and they go to war and they lose in the war, which is evidence that they are cursed. But Hannah is in the middle of a people who are living unrighteously, and she is barren. So she looks as though she is, and she feels as though she is cursed. But is she? And the answer is no. Same principle. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the way she felt, because she has her husband has another wife, and in that he's expressing love to Hannah, but the other one's provoking her. But that falls in line with all of it as well. Someone's in here provoking you, and you're barren. That's just adding to the fire of I am cursed. I am cursed. And so then what comes in there is her husband comes and says, am I not more of a blessing to you than all these children? And she can't disagree with that. Why is it then that you don't eat? And she's not eating the peace offering. You don't sacrifice a peace offering in order to obtain peace with God. You offer a sacrifice of a peace offering because you know you are at peace with God. But she's not eating that sacrifice. Why is she not eating that peace offering sacrifice? Because she doesn't feel like she's in right relationship with God. Well, her husband comes in and says, in essence, is that true? And what does she have to say? No, that's really not true. I am blessed by God. Look at all that God has provided and blessed me with in relation to the husband, even though I am barren. That's a reality. So what does she do? She eats of the peace offering, but right after she eats of the peace offering, what does she do? Now she goes and she offers herself before God, brokenhearted. Why? Because she's still barren. And Eli says he attributes her to being drunk, which tells you what? She's incredibly brokenhearted. She tells him what's going on, and he says to her, a year from now, you'll have a child. Now, God didn't need all that to happen in order for Samuel to become the next prophet, right? God didn't need to do all that in order for Samuel to, I really need a prophet. Well, how am I going to do that? Well, let's make somebody barren, So what did God do in the midst of that hardship and trial? And this is actually the same thing that happens to Job. What does God do in a person who feels cursed, although they are not? Even though every sign says that they are cursed, but they are not. What's God doing in the midst of that? And what does He do with Hannah? What does He do with Job? I can give you a long list. What's he doing in the midst of that? What does He do with Naomi? What's He doing with that? Because He doesn't need all that to happen just to be able to come to this end. What's He doing with that? What happens in all of those circumstances? Whose heart changes? The person who's going through that. And what is the end result of that? And Job answers that. I was with you, but now I know you. I see you like I've never seen you and known you before. It's as if I've never did know you in the way that I know you now. See, there's a movement of the heart that God does in the life of that person who may feel as though they're cursed, and to everybody around them, they accuse of them of being cursed, but be careful how you judge that. Be careful how you judge that. Because this is a pronouncement against a nation. That means that's the broad brush stroke. But is there always a remnant within the nation? And the answer is yes. That's why it's for us in today in the world, we should be less concerned about, my opinion, should be less concerned about all of America becoming a church again, Christian again. The reality is there is a continual downward spiral because the heart of man is excessively wicked. And but for the grace of God, going to continue to go that way. But what can you and I control because God has given us that responsibility? First and foremost, it's myself. Secondly, it's my extended unit of a family. And then it's the extended unit beyond that of the church, this local church. Why is that? Because you want to be a part of the remnant. Where everybody around you says, well, no, you're cursed with everybody else. But the reality is, no, God is doing something in the heart of your life and my life that is incredibly great in the midst of that discipline that He's doing with His people. Does that make sense? I think the thing was, a lot of times Samuel gets lumped in with Eli because Eli's sons were wicked, and then when Eli's sons were wicked, God raises up Samuel, and Samuel becomes the prophet that keeps for a long period of time Saul in line. And then Samuel's kids go south as well. But there's never anything in Scripture that speaks negative of Samuel in the way that he raised his kids. So I think what you're seeing there is it's not an indictment of Samuel, because the Bible could have given us that exact picture again, the way that it did with Eli. But what do you see with Samuel's kids that does repeat? It is a repeat. And the answer to that is Samuel's kids are going south, and they're next in line, and Israel sees it, and Israel says what? They say, because of it. They say, give me a king because Samuel's kids have gone south. Why? It's not true, and it's not true on a couple of fronts. Mainly because when Samuel approaches God, he feels denied, and God says, they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me. And then there's a test that goes on as to whether or not they should or should not accept this king. Because God says to Samuel, tell them this will be your king. And in essence, he's going to take your kids, he's going to take your horses, he's going to take your land, he's going to take all these things, which is not lined up with what Deuteronomy says their king should look like, which is messianic. He should be a servant. Leadership is servanthood, not taking. Well, this will be your king. So they should say, not now, not time. Not that the kingship is wrong, because God planned for there to be a kingship, but not now, not this time, because that's not the king God said that we should look for. But they say, no, give us a king. Well, what is that showing? They're not rejecting Samuel's kids, they're rejecting God. Now, why is it that God can say they're rejecting me, besides just seeing that? What's going on in their life, a pattern that provides them a picture of how God works that they can place faith confidence in. Well, there was a time in their life where there was a priest who had 2 sons, and those sons were wicked, and God worked through that, and in working through that provided for them Samuel. Well, if he did it once, can he do it again? And they know that. The reality is they want to be like all the other nations. They don't want to be distinct. They don't want to be holy. They don't want God as their king. They want someone that they can see as their king, because that's what everybody else does. And so he pulls all that out. So there's not really an indictment there that you see with that, I don't think, with Samuel. But you do see that leadership's kids struggle, generally. Sometimes you see it's because of the way leadership has handled their kids, and sometimes it's silent as to whether or not that's the case. So David with Absalom, clearly there's some discipline issues there going on, because he's never wanting to do anything to Absalom, who has done horrendous things to David's kids that David should have stepped in and stopped. And he didn't. And it looked like it went unnoticed. But who saw? Yeah. And did David ever pay a price for it? Yeah. So I'm bringing all that in to say this is a covenantal thing for a nation, but you find splotches of remnants of people in the midst of a cursed people, and by cursed I mean they're experiencing the discipline of the Lord for Him to communicate to them where they are in relationship to Him. But that's not a one-to-one. It's not a one-to-one. Okay? So we'll start here next week. So because here's why I'm saying this. Today, we generally think if my life is prosperous, I'm blessed by God and not cursed. But that's the exact opposite of what the New Testament tells us. The New Testament tells us the person who's going through hardship and trials and is being tempered is the one who is blessed. And it's multi-layered, but just to start off, one, it's because it's not that he needs to come at this end, and this is the only way that he can come. It's because he's doing something in you and me through that process, and I'm making the claim that training process is actually preparing us to be kingdom rulers and leaders. So who just let's go hypothetical. Who would be the best eternal kingdom leaders? And I'm going to be honest with you, my mind doesn't really necessarily go to Billy Graham. I mean, I don't know Billy Graham personally. He's he's a great preacher. God used him in a miraculous way. But you know who really and truly I think are going to be the best kingdom leaders that I will say, I want to serve under him, I want to serve under her. You know who they're going to be? I believe with all my might, there are going to be people who went through, for lack of a better term, hell on earth, on this earth, and lived well through that. They will be meek. They will be modest. They will know what hardship is. They will care. They will love. And most of the time, we'll walk by them and not give them a second glance. They will genuinely feel like they are no one because of the what this earth has seemed to afford to them. But you know what it's doing in them? Oh, I'll follow them every day. I'll follow them every day. You know why? Because they're not going to lord or command rulership over you. Why not? They've been that person. It's not hypothetical to them. They've been that person. And here's the crazy thing about heaven is, I'm not going to be jealous. You're not going to be jealous? None of us are going to say, I wish I had their spot. I wish I was that leader. We're going to be perfectly content because they're going to be perfect leaders. And whoever God has us ruling, because I believe everybody's going to rule, whoever God has us ruling, whether that be, if it's an animal lover, they may just rule animals. But you know what they're going to do? They're going to love ruling those animals. And they ain't going to want that other job. You understand what I'm saying? So you have to be careful how you weigh this out, because today, America is cursed. Well, maybe, but maybe not. Because what are we maybe entering into? Incredible hardship and trial that is doing what for us? You and I may not have a clue as to what the benefit of that is that's doing for us. Yeah, but it's all good and none of it bad. Because we think of discipline in a negative sense, but it's not negative. Okay? So you have to be careful how you weigh that out. And the second thing is, an individual can feel as though they're cursed by God, but if they are not moving their mind and their feelings under the dominion of God, they will deceive themselves and they won't respond appropriately in that moment or moments or life, right? So either it can, and that can flip both ways. It can be a person who is, let's take David, who has done all of this incredible evil, taking Bathsheba. I mean, as far as I can tell, it's rape, and killed her husband, and then acted like nothing happened. And, Nathan comes to him and gives him the story of himself, and he doesn't see it until Nathan says, "You are that man." So you can be deceived that way, where you think that the silence of God is an endorsement by God. No. I mean, how long has America lived like that? I mean, we've killed how many millions of babies? When was Roe versus Wade passed? Yeah. Do what? Somebody know? 70s, late mid 70s. So let's say 75, 25 years. It's been so long we can't remember.
You talk about that. I read about something the other day, and it just made me think about that. There was a pastor. He was pastoring a very small church in the Chicago area. He had 9 children. 3 of them were out of the house. They lived in Wisconsin, just across the line. He and his wife were going down there to see him. They had gotten a new minivan, and they were on their way to go see them. As they were going down the road on the interstate, a piece of steel fell off a truck, went through their van windshield, and the van exploded immediately. All 6 of their children, 5 of their children died in the van. He and his wife escaped. The next morning, the other child died. The Chicago Tribune went ahead and went to see them and asked them, the situation, etc. And here was their comment. They said, "We're hurting as bad as anyone is, but we know where our children are, and God has never failed us yet."
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the only 3 children that they had left were the ones that were out. That were very, very
Right.
amazing. And they had a big write-up about it in the Chicago Tribune about that years ago, about that here's a family that's lost everything as far as their children are concerned, but they still have everything.
Yep.
They lost everything as far as people.
Yeah. When I think for us the important thing to consider is we never need to be jealous because it's God who gives us all things. So Paul says, I've learned to be content whatever circumstance I am, and that's both sides of the coin. We think of poor, I've learned how to be content when I'm poor, but he doesn't say poor only. He says much and little. So what that means is you got to learn how to be content from God with much. So it's both sides of the coin. So you're pacing God's work and His plan in your life, trusting that it's the perfect plan and He has good in mind for you, and that's what you are living in faith on because it's what He has said. So I'm trusting in the words of God because it was a promise of God that He has proclaimed that I have the availability to trust. And when I do, that's credited as righteousness. So I'm not putting faith in myself. I'm putting faith in that which He has said and proclaimed. So now, the best I can see it is, every step along that journey, I'm continually placing faith in what He has said. And as I'm placing faith in what He has said, all of that is being pushed forward and credited. And I'm not concerned about how I am relative to you or anyone else, because God's not valuing it based upon that. He is valuing it based upon what He has given me in terms of stewardship and responsibility. So I never have to feel incompetent because that which I have is simply that which God has given me. And if it's lacking, guess what? That's good. Because He's even putting me in a place where someone else can supply what's lacking. And isn't it interesting, in relation to the church, who is to receive more honor? Who needs to receive more honor? Not the one who seems as though he's been given everything. It's the one who seems he is lacking. That's why it seems to me, we look at it, let's take my profession, if you want to even call it that, office, whatever. The big church, man, they've got it, whatever. I look at it as the exact opposite. I'm not jealous of them, And in some ways, I feel like I'm a benefactor more than even them, because value is not placed upon that. It's the faithfulness that you're seeking to do in the midst of that. They have hardships, I have hardships, and there's no, that value system would be skewed, but that's oftentimes the way it's perceived or thought. So wherever God, that's why we say, bloom in the place that God has planted you. Wherever God's planted you, that's where you need to bloom, because that's where He's planted you. He's given you availability to be salt and light in that place. And will reward you for being that in that place. And when He's ready for you to move on, guess what? Move on.
In my Bible study today, it was First Thessalonians 5:18, I think. But anyway, accept every day what you were given.
Yeah.
You have to accept
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So, all right. Let's pray. Father, grateful for this day, grateful for your word, grateful for the availability just to study and think and meditate and dig and just the interaction with your people. Father, we just pray that it would be useful for your kingdom's sake, and Father, continue to grow us in the place where you've planted us. And Father, you are more than enough for us, and may you be our greatest joy, because it is in and through you and your Son where we find life. These things we pray in your Son's holy name. Amen.